Okay, good evening, everyone. Tonight we're going to have a xLights Gems presentation on an introduction to xLights all about pixels, presented by David Robinson. And well, as I said before, all these recordings are on the xLights Gems YouTube channel. You can find them there. And please keep your microphones muted, your video off. And with that, I'll turn it over to David. Thank you, David.
Thank you very much. If y'all don't know me, I'm David Robinson. I'm David R. in the room. As was talked about a few moments ago, I've been doing this for, I think it's 5 years, since 2019. But length of time necessarily doesn't necessarily mean I know everything because I know I don't. I'd like to thank all the other helpers in here that help provide support for all these enthusiasts because that's how I got involved coming into the Zoom room and getting help years ago to understand how to make this happen. So the resource in here and the knowledge and the compassion these people have to provide information is out of this world. Tonight is a drinking game. I hope you have your favorite alcohol. Mine is a Black Forest Dunkel German beer, and I don't know what the special word I'm going to say is. Maybe you guys can chat because I can't see the chat right now anyway. So um, I'm also a sequencer. If you want to look at my stuff, just chat me up after and we can talk about it. So let's go ahead and get started. Notice it says all about pixels, at least what I know anyway. There's so many things about pixels and that I may or may not have seen. So the basis of this is what questions we've received in the Zoom room over the years. So I've basically compiled those questions, and that's what we're going to go through at the end for troubleshooting. So um, there's so many different pixels out there, and the question noobs have is, and noob is not a derogatory term; it's a term of endearment. The noobs have is which is the best thing to use. Well, just like we had a discussion earlier about what's the best printer, what's best to use is what you decide it is. It could be strips, it could be pebbles or seeds, it could be twinkly, it could be any number of pixels that are out there. Um, every year, new pixels come out and different vendors call them different things. So the differences are weight, longevity, how you're being used. Like pucks would be used in a under a soffit, if you will, because they provide more better brightness. People like to use Evos and gumdrops because they're light, and same with seed and pebbles. Those are used because they're very light. Just depends on your application. So any one of these can be used in any number of ways. As I'm going along, if anybody has any questions, just go ahead and ask it because it's easier to get them out at the beginning because I can't see chat if you're asking questions. So there's a term that you may have heard, it's called protocols. And protocols is how things communicate, not just pixels, but other things in the electronic universe, if you will. And it basically tells how things are supposed to talk to each other. It's rules, syntax, semantics, and how the communication goes between devices. So for pixels, there are a number of different protocols. As you can see, I've listed a few of them here. The one that xLights support is WS2811. That doesn't mean that it doesn't support the others. It just means that's what they write everything towards because the basis of W2811 can also be in one of these other protocols. So the lights could also work. Um, there's a glossary of all the pixels out there. Advantech has a good site and it explains how they work. And if you want to go in and dig into them, this is how I learned about pixels and how they work. But you go and read what the protocols are and what that means to how they talk together. Again, some of these pixels will work with the WH2811 protocol. It's best that try them and see if they're what you expect. So, but again, 2811 is the basis for that. I'm going to put this slide deck in the chat if I can later, and also it's being recorded so you can get these links as well. So there's a big discussion out there. What's better, resistor or regulated? Well, um, I think I only use resistor pixels. I've never used regulated. There, a few years back, you may have heard of the pixel fires, and those with regulated pixels that, they overheated. Um, Pixels will overheat if they're overpowered. Pixels run at a voltage of 5, and even if you're running 12-volt pixels, the chips on there, whether they're resistors or regulated, uh, take the voltage down to 5 volts. So um, the resistors work over resistance of wire length. So when the voltage drops below 9.5 volts, being pushed through the wire would cause the pixels to start acting funky. So there's some figures in here and some talks about what that means. So voltage drop starts happening. I've measured it out. I did some bench tests, and I was able to get on some resistor pixels out to about 220 till I saw a drop of voltage that the pixels stop working. So again, it depends. There's a This is all covered on Wired Watch, and I'm going to go there in a second. Um, Rule of thumb here is if you need regulated pixels, it's to go voltage drop over long distance. So again, this is an opinion. Um, I've chose not to go regulated just because resistors have worked for me. This information is all available on the Wired Watts website. Ken's done a great job providing this information. Go out and read it. He has a lot of stuff under his Learn channel, his Learn tab, and he talks about different things that about our hobby. So take some time and read through his stuff. It's good stuff. It's not to say nobody else doesn't have good stuff, but I just like Ken's. It's easy to read. Um, if you're wondering how can you tell the difference between resistor or regulator, well, if you look at these are resistor pixels, and they're 12 volt. And the reason you know they're 12 volt, I'll show you the 5 in a second. But the resistors, you can tell because of the number of chips aligned on the PCB inside, right? So resistors have less chips, and basically you can see 3 or 4 and 1. So there's more chips, excuse me. The regulated usually have 2 chips, one on either side. So and in 5 volt, they only have one chip on one side. So that's the difference, how you can tell they are. On this picture, if you look here on the bottom, it says ground, data in, and negative. All of the pixels should be, as these are all highlighted in what the voltage is. This one is 12 volt. The 5 volt doesn't say the voltage. Or yeah, it does. It says 5 volt on there. But you can see if you don't know what you have, if you just look at the pixel, and look at the PCB, that's the voltage that it is. The other thing to note is the printed side of the circuit board where it says 12 DI and ground is the in, meaning that's where everything goes in. If you look at the back side of the pixel right here, there's no markings. So that's the out side of the pixel. So if you got pixels that had no pigtails on them and or no connectors, you can look at the pixel and tell what side to connect them up to. Does that make sense? Any questions on that? Nope. Okay. So people talk about different type of connectors. There's RayWoo, XConnect, and JST. I use RayWoo and JST. I used JST when I started because it was available on Amazon when I started learning this junk. And I'm still using JSTs on my house outline. They work. They don't stop working. I just sealed them up when I put them up, so they've been working fine for as long as I've had them up. The difference between RayWoo and XConnect, they're about the same size when you look at them. But the RayWoo, you can see this is the male because it has the out connectors, if you will. But the male has the large nut on it. So on RayWoo, the nut is on the male side, and on XConnect, the nut is on the female side. So that's the difference between the two. And you can quickly see they don't play well together. They don't mix. There are different gender benders, if you will, that allow you to change from XConnect to RayWoo and back and forth that help that change them if you do have XConnect mixed with RayWoo. I do have that. I do have some X Connect out in my yard, and I do use gender benders, and they work fine. So let's get to the common questions. I know I've been talking fast, just I always do. So we got quite a few calls. This is only I only got 25 pixels lighting up. Why is that? Um, it could be many things, but what we've come to notice is it in most cases is how the controller is set for the number of pixels for output. In other words, that would be the first place you would go look to see if your settings in your controller is set to light up more than 25 pixels. The different controllers had different bases for what that number of pixels they light up on default, but that's controlled by your controller. So you would look into controller settings and look at the port outputs and make sure that the port output reflect the number of pixels on your string. So let's say on port one, you have a prop that's got 150 pixels and only 25 light up. Go into your configuration on your controllers tab in your controller and see on port one how many pixels are there. That's the first place you look. And you can go ahead and change that in your controller setting to 150 and rerun your test and see if they light up. If they do, when you're working in xLights and you've done your layout and you're getting ready to visualize, when you do your visualization, that's when you would push that configuration to the controller with the settings. So that's how it gets there. Again, by default, it's 25 or 50. If you forget to change it because you didn't push your settings from the visualize out, you can change it in the other place just to make sure they work. Pixel stays blue. That happens usually because there's a power issue. Um, I've had a prop for 4 years that had a pixel that stayed blue. And I just left it because nobody saw it but me, and it ran fine, right? When the controller or when the sequence came on, it worked fine. But when the sequence was off, it was sitting there. There was a pixel that stayed blue, and that was relative to power. Now, it could also be that the controller is not doing any data blanking. If you see that as an issue, I know I had quite a few my first, second year. I went into when I set it up in FPP, if you guys use FPP, I set it up to shut off all pixels in between my sequences. So I cleared out all of the garbage that would happen. That's an FPP setting, and that'll be covered in another class later on. So pay attention when that one comes up. Why is one light brighter than the others? Well, my experience is it's getting ready to go. It's on its way out. So more than likely that pixel is going to stop. And because if that pixel stop, it usually stops everything after it. So I keep on hand repair sets, if you will, 2 pixels with quick connects on them so I can go out and replace them on the fly during the show so I can bring my prop back up. Um, only 3 of 500 pixels light up. So again, I talked earlier about the power related to the pixels. A rule of thumb is a pixel pulls 0.06 amps. There is a pixel calculator out there. You can go look at it to get the reality. What I use is zero point 0 times pixels, pixel count divided by 12, I believe. I can't remember off the top of my head right now, but that tells me how many pixels I can light up on 12 volts on a port. Now, a lot of the controllers will run anywhere from 600 to 800 pixels a port from the controller. Now, at 20 frames a second. Now, just because the controller can push that many pixels with data, it doesn't mean the power coming from the controller is going to do that. Because if you look at the fuse that's on your controllers, most of them are 12 or 5 amps and excuse me, 10 or 5 amps, and that just is a lot less than 500 pixels could pull. Or so if you were trying to pull 500 pixels on one port, you possibly would blow the fuse eventually. So how you would get around that is you would do power balancing or power injection. And again, I think that's a class that we're going to cover a little bit later. I do I push all my ports out to the max. So I have 750 pixels on a port on a cult, and I do power balancing by power goes in the very beginning and power goes in the very end. And the power's coming from the same PSU, so I don't have to worry about negatives or any of that. So it keeps all of it, keeps it all on the same plane, if you will. So um, another thing we get is the props go out after the rain. It just doesn't work the next night. Um, or it worked fine last night and it rained and now it's not working today. Well, what we've noticed is, and you may have noticed on the connectors, they have O-rings on them. Well, if the O-ring's chipped or nicked or it's not there, that would be a reason that it's getting in there. The other thing you can do to clear that is use dielectric grease or spray the connector with WD-40. WD stands for water displacement, and it's the 40th formula they put together to build that stuff. So back when I used to race cars off-road, we would spray the distributor with WD-40 between each heat, so we made sure that the water didn't take the car out. So the other thing is dielectric grease. There's a lot of people that use that, which works fine. Know that dielectric grease will attract contaminants, and if you use it too much, you will have to clean out your connectors. What can happen with dielectric grease is it can cause water to stay in the connection, even though the grease is keeping it from shorting out. And what will happen is you'll get, what is it, galvanic process, and you'll see that the um, connectors are green. And if they're green, that means you have galvanic response to the power going between one connector to the other. So you would take some contact cleaner like CRC contact cleaner or something like that and clean all the grease out to make sure that they're not holding any water. So again, WD-40 is your friend. To me, it is. The other thing that happens is pending failure. Props, I mentioned about connectors, but if a pixel itself has a bad seal and the epoxy is cracked and or failing, water will get into the board and it will cause it to be an issue. Um, I had some last year that as the temperature dropped, they worked fine, but when the temperature came up, they stopped working. Because when I got in there and investigated it, the epoxy was cracked and basically it was opening it up and it was allowing it to short out. So I ended up replacing them. So another thing that props go out is this could be a pending failure of the physical pixel. So look at it and see if you see a crack or if you see a problem with the epoxy. Everything tests from the test button. We get that all the time. So some controllers have a test button, and when you push it, it lights up the lights. And that's where we get the thing. Everything tests from the test button. But xLights visualizer isn't getting everything to light up. Well, it's back to or excuse me, xLights isn't getting everything to light up. It's back to what I said earlier about have you visualized and do you have the right number of pixels in the string on the port that you're working with? Make sure that's correct in your visualizer and re-push those settings to your controller. Um, the other thing is when you know that you have it set right in the visualizer and you've pushed it, you can use the xLights test button or xLights test to make sure everything is correct before you go out to the controller. That's also a way to look at it. But so you're aware of the test button on a lot of the controllers basically flood every channel on that controller with pixel data to light stuff up. It doesn't care what your settings are. It just lights everything up. So that's why you'll get everything test from the test button, but when I run it from xLights, it doesn't. So check your strings and make sure they're right in the visualizer and you've uploaded your outputs to your controllers. Um, Model is not lighting up. My first year, I spent one evening with Ryan on the phone and I couldn't figure out why my model wasn't lighting up, but it tested fine from my bench. I took it in and out 5 times and everything was great. It was working perfectly. And I had my ports labeled wrong. So I had it set in my visualizer to be on port 1, but the wires connected in the controller were connected to port 2. So it's a common, it's just, it may not be common, but for me, we hear a lot about it. That's this port's not lighting up. So move your model to a different port and see if you can get it to work. And that will point to the fact that your ports are wrong or not configured right, or the port just could be bad. I have a receiver that port number 3 went out in the middle of my show. Luckily, I had extra and I threw one out there, but the port went out. So I had to, make sure that the port was working. So the model's not lighting up. Check your ports and make sure they're correct in your visualizer and you push the outputs. All test well on the bench, but it's not lighting in the yard. Normally, that's related to the distance that data can be pushed. Everybody said, what's the best distance or extension to use from your controller? I have one that's 36 feet away, and I have two data boosters on it, one at the controller and one in the middle of the run. But I've gone up to 36 feet on a drop. Now, you may live in a different area code and time zone, so it may not work that way for you. Um, in other words, results may vary. So if you're finding that everything works on the bench but not in the yard, more than likely you're going to need a data booster. Um, I think they're called F amps by Falcon. They sell them in a 5-pack, I think, for 25 bucks. And then Ken sells them. He calls them Pixel Booster, and he sells them for about the same price. And you just literally put it in the um, part of the connection or part of the run. I know on one, it was running so far to my graveyard, it was, I don't want to say 25 feet. I had to break it down to two 10-foot cables and put a pixel booster in the middle of it to get everything to work. So data boosters, they're cheap. Go ahead and have them before you get your show going because you never know when you're going to need them. My lights keep freezing. Well, they're freezing because it's losing data. I know that I mentioned earlier that my experience was that sometimes a sequence runs and when it's done, there's still lights on. It's because they lost data and they stayed in their current state. Um, they could be losing data for any number of reasons. It could be the pixels are starting to go out. It could be you need to put a data booster in there, as I mentioned in the previous bullet. But more than likely, the cause of freezing is losing data. I have also noticed that if you're doing power balancing or power injecting, if sometimes the port can go out, but they still get power from your power balance and power injection, and the pixels may stick on. I just had to disconnect my power balancing to get them to reset and then just reconnected everything. So I reset my controller, made sure the ports were right and all that, and then shut them down all the way, remove the power injection and reconnected it and it cleared it out. I eventually had to replace the string of pixels that was having a problem because it kept happening and I just don't have time to deal with it when that stuff starts happening. So moral of that story is have extra pixels on hand. Lights are flickering white. One of our guys brought that up and he's an electrician and he said sometimes people run conduit and they run the data out and they also run power out in the same conduit. Well, what happens when power is in the same conduit as your data? Sometimes power induction happens because the AC power is running at a certain frequency, if you will, and it impacts the data that's going across the line. So the lights will flicker white. Even if it's laying next to an extension cord, it could be a possibility. I've never seen it, but he told me that if the extension cord is next to one of your extensions, you may have the opportunity to see data lights flickering white. Um, Lights are intermittent. I shake it and it works. Well, somewhere in the whole thing that we've talked about so far, there's a bad connection, or there's a solder joint, a cold solder joint on a pixel. I mentioned earlier that it got hot and my pixels quit working. It's because I had a cold solder joint in the pixel and I could do nothing about it. So I just had to replace them. So I would shake the prop and it would work for one night. It'd work for 2 hours and then it would stop working. And I finally just got fed up and threw all the pixels out, pulled all the pixels out and replaced every one of them with new pixels. So if it's lighting intermittent, you have a ongoing problem. You need to first check your connectors, make sure they're good, make sure there's no water in them, make sure everything's dry. And if none of that clears it up, more than likely you're going to have a solder problem inside a pixel or pixels going out. I can't get the string to light on the port. We hear that every year at least once. And believe it or not, they've hooked them up backwards. Remember the the picture I showed you earlier about where the in is? They had actually hooked the pixels up backwards. So basically they had the polarity wrong and the pixels wouldn't run. So again, that's one of the questions we get at least once every year. Um, I have a list of videos here that you can go through that have been put together over the years by different helpers and different groups in xLights. And again, I'll have that in the slide deck. You can, it takes you right to the YouTube where that information is, and you can watch it. Some of these are Keith Wesley classes. Some of them are GEMS classes. Some of them are power balancing, power injection. But those are links that tell you a lot of information. By the way, these links are also contained in the website xlights.info, and I believe it's under useful links. There's a one of the tabs there in xlights info has quite a few number of useful links to help you better understand how to do this hobby. So to look at xlights info. If you're looking for that information, it's there as well. At this point, I'm ready to open it to any questions or ask the helpers if they have anything they want to add. Any questions? Man, am I that good? Okay, well, if there's no questions, I guess that's it. I'm going to stop sharing. Thanks everybody for listening. Reach out to me later if you want to know about my sequences. And I'm here most nights. I've just taken off a couple of months because I needed a break from xLights, but I'll be back in the room pretty regularly here going forward. Thanks for having me. There you go. Have a great night.
Okay, we have a question from Cheryl David. Cheryl, is it related to the presentation?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
We were wondering if they have a recommended number of pixels for seed bead pixels for power injection. Like on the 12 millimeter bullets, it's every 300 you inject power to cover 150. Is it the same on seed beads or is it different?
No, it's about the same. Again, depends on the pixel. The pixel amperage draw has gotten less over the last few years. It used to be 0.06. Now I think it's 0.04 or 0.05. But if you do the Ohm's law math, it'll tell you how far you can go. Most people start power injecting on 12 volt at about 250 to 300.
I have 300.
Yeah. Now you can lower your brightness setting. Some people, me being one of them, I have some singing trees and they're 350 pixels and they're running fine with a reduced brightness of 30%. I take it down to 30% and I can run it without power injection. So that's the setting that you have in xLights where you can globally set your power output, or excuse me, your brightness. It's in your controller configuration, or you can even set it at the prop level. So depending on your brightness, depends on how many amps it draws.
Right. Does anybody run it at 100%?
Some people do. We have heard that some are running it at 100%.
The Aussies do.
And I think everybody in here says, it's gonna blind your crowd. Now it depends on your
Yes, it will.
yeah, it depends on your distance from the street and so forth. I mean, I have I think 3,500 megatree and I'm running 60 feet from the street and I'm running it at 20% because if I take it any higher, it's too bright and it overpowers. It's like, setting under the Holiday Inn sign and blinking. So, or the hotel sign. So yeah, it just depends on distance and things like that.
But if you're in Australia and it gets dark at, after 10 p.m. and you still want to show at your 8 p.m., you probably will run them at 100% just to be visible.
Yeah, over on the other side of the world because their timing is different for Christmas. It doesn't get dark till later. I know Mark M on here, he runs it at 100% because it's bright. I think all the way up till 9:30, 10 o'clock. So it just depends on where you're at, right?
Thanks.
Um, there's a question on red. Does red take less power than green or blue? I
Nope.
think they take the same amount of
Mhm.
power, truthfully. Um, I don't think there's any difference on RGB with the power as it's all the same as far as I know. Any comments by anybody on that?
Red seems to be, it take, so like if you're running out of power, red can possibly light what the other colors can't.
Yeah,
So red LED does consume a little bit less power than some of the other colors to generate it, but it's not enough to alter your calculations. But
yeah.
that's why sometimes when you're running white and starting to run out, the pixels might start to pink up a little bit. Depends on the specific pixel. But yeah, red is a little bit lower current draw as far as just an LED specifically, but it's negligible when you're doing your math from your calculations and planning.
I see Sherry asked, is red or blue staying on the same thing? I have one that is staying on a light white, like a cream color, and it was going out. So it's just more common that we see it as blue. It's not saying that it's always blue, but yeah, it could
Okay,
be.
thank you. And I think that Tony was responding to my question because I have one in my icicle um, that just stays red all the time. And
Yeah,
so I was just curious if that meant the same thing as the blue, but I didn't climb up there and change it out. I left it, let it
yeah,
be.
Yeah.
yeah. Mine's
No,
up on
I
the
would
front of
think
the
that's,
house.
yeah, go ahead.
Mine's up on the front of the house, and I'm the only one that knows it's going off because people watching the show don't really notice it. So after 3 years, I finally rewired it. It went for 3 years like that. So
Yeah. If it's just staying on red, um, more than blue, it's most likely just a bad pixel where the other
Okay,
two, the
yeah.
green and blue, are not
yeah,
lighting up
Yeah,
at
and
all.
that's what I thought. And I'll just use, I've got Clickets,
yeah.
and
Mhm.
before I put it up this year, I'll change it out. But I was curious because
Yeah.
David was generous to great presentation, David. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
He mentioned the blue, and I wondered if red was
Mhm.
kind of the same thing.
Yeah, it is the same thing. It's just that again, blue is kind of an indicator of some, other issue. They could be going out at any one of the colors, so it's hard to tell.
Thank you.
All right.
Uh,
David,
All right.
yes,
I think
sir.
we're good.
just FYI, they are coming out with the 24-volt Pixel this year.
Yeah,
That just like the 5-volt Pixel, you can't tell the difference.
yeah. And it's
Yep.
great you brought that up. I forgot to mention that. I added it to my notes and I forgot to mention it. You can run 24 volts through a 12 volt pixel. The resistors will take the voltage down to 5 volts, but just know you will create a heck of a lot of heat. So if you hear people saying they have 12 volt pixels, a 24 volt power supply, it is possible. It's just what John just brought forward was there is a new pixel come out that the base voltage of it is 24 volts and will run on a 24 volt power supply exclusively.
And
Mm.
one other quick comment, if I may, David,
No,
on
go ahead.
talking
I
about
opened it up to you guys.
yeah, when you were talking about resistor regulators.
Yeah.
So there's a whole series of pixel types out now that are native 12 volt.
Yep.
So when it's a native 12 volt, or like in the case of the 24s, you're talking about they're a native 24 volt. The native 12 volts do not use regulators or resistors to
Right.
downstate. So they're all handled with the actual on the electronic chip.
Yeah.
So
Like the
native 12
Evos.
volt has no step down.
Yeah, the Evos and I think the seed and
Gumdrops,
think the
gumdrops,
gumdrops.
flatbacks, Evos.
Yeah,
Most of those that are 12 volt are
yeah,
on a native 12 volt LED driver chip.
And
Okay.
just to add, running at higher voltage just limits your voltage drop at the distance, right?
exactly.
So when you feed your pixels, and that's the very common question, what should I get, 5-volt pixels or 12-volt pixels? With the 12-volt pixels, your voltage drop is gonna be much less at the same distance. So you're gonna get away with having more pixels before you have to inject more power into them.
Yeah, the 5-volt pixels basically, I've rule of thumb I've heard is between 125 and 150 for power injection on a 5-volt. I don't run them, but one of the helpers does, and that's what he puts his at. So again, zip code and barometric pressure results vary, but yeah.
Okay. Ray, is your question related to the presentation?
Yes, it is.
What's up,
That
Ray?
Okay.
that blink between sequences, was that what you were talking about? To clear your lights out?
Yeah, I was having an issue, and there's a FPP command that allows you to shut off all pixel data. So basically, pardon me, I was having pixels that were going out and they were freezing, and so I added that just because I didn't want to have to redo everything. I was able to throw that command in the FPP, so it would clear pixel data off everything.
Yeah, because I see in there blink between sequence.
Yeah, I think
That's
it's
blank, yeah.
it's an FPP command called all lights off.
Yeah,
Is that
Yep.
one you use, David?
yeah, that's what I'm referring to.
Okay.
Yes. So an FPP command called all lights off.
Yeah, and so I would throw the command between sequences to clear up all pixels that were going bad. And I ended up having to replace 5,000 pixels because they were crap. And once I did that, I haven't been having that issue. This last 3 years or 2 years, it's not been a problem. But I think there was a universal problem with pixels in 19 and 20 across the hobby. So because of the chip shortage and all kinds of stupid stuff that was going on in the world.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you.
Yep.
You're welcome.
Uh,
Okay. With that, I think if there's no more questions, I'm going to stop the recording here. Thank you, David, very much. Great, informative.
Cool. Everybody have a good night. Thanks for listening.
Yep. Thank you.